the system. It's your turn to make the wheel of the Dharma turn. How many people tried using thought as the object of meditation? A few people? What's that? Yeah. Just a few. How did it go? Okay, we have one bad experience in the back there.
What could that be?
Oh, I see, sleep. Okay. That's not bad necessarily. You could use sleep as the object of meditation. It requires a little bit more work to warm up to that.
You have to be awake for that one.
Sometimes you have no choice because you're actually falling asleep.
Yeah. Actually, it's true. If you're kind of moderately pretty sleepy, it can be very hard to catch yourself falling asleep. But if you're kind of at the point of almost being paralyzed with sleepiness, where you have to use 100% of your energy to not fall asleep, then it can be actually kind of easy to kind of just drop into the black hole, so to speak, and see what that experience really is. So it's another good one. But that one's hard. That one's hard. You have to be really, really sleepy and not just kind of sort of fading out.
I was wondering if anybody has ever had any experience with dream yoga, or is that kind of what you're talking about? Mm-hmm.
That's different than dream yoga.
You can meditate while you sleep.
It's a really interesting topic, and I just finished an online course with from Tricycle Magazine with a book called Dream Yoga, and the guy's name is Andrew Olensky, I think. Anyway, I would recommend that book, or else go to thetricycle.com and look at their. You can probably pick up those online courses. It was fascinating in the sense of using it to carry, well, in a lot of senses, but to try and carry just the sense of this is like a dream constantly, you know. So it was quite a good course. But I don't know anything about it.
Do I? That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
I mean, not like every night, but I don't know, like pretty few times a year. I mean, I tend to get like visions or pretty profound things that come up in dreams. And I find that a lot of times in a dream state, because I mean, we think of it as a different Bardo state, certain things can become clearer, I find, or understood, but not in ways that we could say on, in a waking state, put into words, something that a teaching or something just kind of clicks and really, we really feel it, or at least I feel it, but it's not like something that I could just say, I could wake up and go, oh, this is how I put it in the words or describe it, but you understand it. Nonetheless, there's an understanding, that's kind of conveyed there. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about. Is
I just tried meditating as I'm falling asleep, and then also just like a little bit of attempting like was it vivid dreaming or conscious dreaming? I've tried. Yeah, lucid dreaming.
I actually used to have a habit of like waking up at like a decent-ish hour, like 7 o'clock, 7:30, and then going back to sleep for like another solid hour. And I always remember my dreams whenever I did that.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's like the easiest way to like have like remember your dream after you go to sleep is like to sleep when you're not tired, which isn't a great habit, but
Yeah. I have to read more about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
a helpful practice that I actually do that I picked up from Soto for years is every night before I go to bed, I actually say a mantra and do a bit of practice right before sleeping, because I find it kind of helps set the mindset. At least it's said in the Soto tradition that kind of like our day actually starts the night before. So if you kind of set the mindset of meditation before bed, that can be helpful. And it's also practical because there is actually a small % chance you could die while you sleep. Who knows? An asteroid could hit, or, like the people who just got hit with fires down in Northern California. You never know. And so if you're kind of going to sleep with the mindset of, okay, well, let me kind of, take refuge and do some mantra practice or something right before bed, then it's kind of, I don't know, I find it's very helpful. I've been doing that for years, so.
Dora,
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
had something, Dirk?
Well, I was just going to mention that's a great idea too, or great thing to do is practice before going to bed. But one thing I was going to say is just if you want to work on one thing related to dream yoga, it's kind of hard to work on, but it's basically what you want to become aware that you're dreaming when you're dreaming. So to know that you're dreaming, which is kind of the inverse of knowing that we're in this sense, when we're not asleep, we're in a certain way dreaming. But if we can recognize in the dream state that we're dreaming, then we can have more control of what goes on there. So, and if you could recognize, then too, if something scary is happening, you can recognize it's not really happening and free yourself from that. You could practice while you're asleep. So things become possible, but kind of an early step is being able to catch yourself at times while you're asleep and to know that you're dreaming.
Part of my interest in it was just when you mentioned the class on death and dying, I was thinking about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, read that a little bit, and then just how it talks about, the moment of death or that crossing of Bardo states is an opportunity for awakening, and just wondering, crossing into the Bardo of sleep, could that be seen as like practice for that moment?
I think it's pretty easy to say yes, because any practice would be practice that would be useful for that moment, but it seems more similar that a shift from one somewhat stable kind of awareness to another.
We get caught on some of these things, and a couple things that I have heard from teachers. Any moment is a possible moment of waking up. As Dora was saying, the teachings are, in essence, this is illusory now, or at least the way we see it. But we don't see through that. We could wake up in this dream and go, oh, wow, you know? So a lot of what the course was teaching is the dream yoga is kind of a facsimile of what you can work on with your awakening, your awaked mind, awake states. And it's pretty clear, I think, that if we don't practice a lot now with this precious human life moment, at the moment of death, it's not going to be a time we're going to be able to wake up. For the reason that that's going to be turbulent and difficult. I mean, even though we've done it, according to the philosophy and teachings of Buddhism, we've died endless amounts of time. Several of the texts say, you know, if all the bones of the forms you've had were piled up, they'd be higher than the tallest mountain. If all the tears you've cried in your endless past lives were put together, they'd fill more than the greatest sea. So those are kind of startling poetic thoughts, but that's really the philosophy. So, we don't even remember it. I mean, that's the thickness of the ignorance, right? Well, I can't talk for you. I don't remember dying the last time, but done it a lot of times. And so it's all about get as much clarity, compassion, wisdom now through the very basic practices we give, you know, shamatha, insight, four immeasurables, 6 perfections. Get traction with those. That's the consciousness that's going to go forward. So, you know, they say that the clear light of mind dawns for everyone in the death time after all the junk shuts down, the 5 senses and the mental consciousness that's always telling story, making so much of everything. All that shuts down, so this clear, natural way of our mind being dawns, but we miss it. It goes by like that. They say quicker than a snap, because we're right again grabbing a new form because we're terrified or we're craving. And you can look at your own shamatha practice. How many times, you know, you might get a flash of clarity or some real peace, and boom, the mind's grabbing another thought pattern. That's the same thing. So it's not, that's something different than that. Every thought dies. And then what do? We grab and make up a whole new, turn the wheel again, crave again, confused again, angry again, irritated again. But we can break it. But it's about doing it now, you know. Just keep doing the practices and get some traction. And, you know, then we'll come out fine. We might even come to a time when we die and the clear light rises and and it's like, oh, this time, not so confused. So.
Thank you.
It's often said that even if we have unstable recognition of the nature of mind in this life, that even little flashes of that will be very helpful when kind of the rest of the chatter dies down, and the certain aspects of momentum continue, but there's kind of a dissipation of some kinds of momentum at that point. So in that point, then it's possible to really say, oh yeah.
But we can't even imagine, I can't even imagine a state of all 5 senses gone, the 6th mental sense shut down shop. And in that state, where there's no I, which is the great opportunity, you know, because this grasping at a separate hallucinated I shut down. So it's a great opportunity, but got to be able to use it. So that's what we're practicing. Every time in Shine, when you see you're caught in the content and you free yourself, that's one of those free moments. Oh, caught, let it go. Right there. Yeah. And the job is to repeat and stabilize that. So pretty soon, I assume that the masters stay in that state. That's what's so attractive to us when we see them, you know. They just have huge amounts of space and light. They're just moving through this dream world and totally enjoying it, just beaming out wisdom and compassion. You know, you see Khenpo Lodro Donyo or the Dalai Lama or, you know, so many of them, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. You know, there's just something different going on there. You know, we go, wow, something different's going on there. I'm intrigued. Yeah.
Usha.
I think it was quite a long time ago, but one of the teachers said that, you know, in the moment of your death, or to just recall your teachers, just recalling them, like what you said, how we know they're different. But I was in a plane once, and it was really, you know, we're having really rough landing, even touching down and then going back again because we weren't landing properly. And I was really scared, but I did that. I just recalled any of our teachers, and it's just a doorway to maybe get to another place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it almost feels like it diminishes it to use the word devotion, but that the openness of that connection, and there's something about the we understand in ways we can't articulate. We appreciate, or I could say we appreciate in ways that we can't articulate when we have that kind of sense of connection with our teachers. And that just bringing that to mind creates this kind of opening. It's very profound. It's like, you know, the whole practice of Guru Yoga is connected to that kind of opening to that. Alesh.
A little bit different. At the beginning, you mentioned negative sensations, positive sensations, and neutral sensations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can elaborate on the neutral.
The neutral.
Neutral. I'm
Yeah.
still thinking, and I analyze. I go like, no, this is not neutral. This is a little bit positive, and this is a little bit negative.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you know what?
Yeah. It's that's actually the practice right there. Is you look like that, and then you see it's only things that we truly are completely neutral. We don't. It doesn't even register. It's just kind of we're numb or blank. It's kind of a blank zone. Most of the time when we get sort of into that neutral-ish territory, it's usually a little bit of like kind of get out of my way. I want something. I want the important information. I want to know what's really good or really bad. So there's a little bit of aversion to. Yeah, it's kind of like I want the more intense stuff, because the more intense stuff is what I interpret as information for my life. And my life is made up of attraction and aversion. So the neutral is kind of interesting, but being able to actually the exercise or the contemplation that I suggested at the very beginning of you would notice a sense of cold, and there's this, ooh, it's a little cold. Ooh, I'm afraid it's going to get a little colder. Yeah, but that same exact sensation, if you're sitting next to a window with the sun beating in and it's 100 degrees, that same exact sensation, oh, what relief. I hope it gets a little colder. So it's a very funny business, because of the sensation and even the sense of pleasant and unpleasant is conditioned. So it becomes, but that piece of that, it's though the actual when we're doing the 4 foundations of mindfulness practices, and we are actually resting with pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, really setting our attention and feeling that, it's you can begin to see that it's kind of ephemeral. I was talking with Lama Michael once, and I said it's actually a very difficult practice, because it is kind of ephemeral. It's not a super stable sense of pleasant. It's not like a hum that just goes on. But in that, it's very powerful. I used the example. I said, for me, it's kind of like the spark in an engine. Kind of, you put all the causes and conditions, and you compress the air and the fuel, and then you have the spark plug goes off, and it goes bang, and then it really propels. And then we have the little tinge of cold, and it can propel us into long stories about, oh, I remember how I was really cold once, and is this going to be as bad as that? Or it just goes and goes, and then we kind of keep on fabricating more of what we call reality out of that, which is the dream.
I somehow put it together with practice or contemplation of equanimity. This, negative, positive, neutral.
Neutral and equanimity are very, very different things.
Could you elaborate?
They're not the same. Because this is when we're talking about the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, we're talking about feeling tone. And the neutral, as we were talking about, it's kind of almost like you don't even see it. If we have all kinds, if we can kind of check sensations on our body, it's actually, if you actually look, you just kind of let the mind move through the whole sphere of the whole domain of bodily sensation, kind of using geographic, the leg continent and the arm continent and the head island, and you go through the geography and you find out that there's a little tension here or a little something there. It's actually hard to place our attention where it's just a neutral sensation. We can go from here to here if there's something kind of rubbing here and it's a little something. It's hard to actually place the attention on neutral. Equanimity is a completely different practice. Equanimity is not about sort of neutral. It's not about squashing attachment and aversion to the point where you don't feel either attachment or aversion. Dora once said it's more like equal caring. Sort of, it's an equal engagement. It's very active. It's very engaged, and the equanimity won't produce a kind of sameness in response just because we're treating. I'm treating everything as equal. There's a kind of fake in that. That's almost like a protection for myself. It's all equal. But real equanimity is the kind of the equal, profound caring and connection, that equal sense of appreciation for all beings want happiness, all beings want to be free of suffering. And how that manifests for each being in any moment is very unique. So the equanimity launches us into something that's this equal, deep caring for beings who are in all these unique circumstances. So the manifestation of equanimity is something very different than neutral.
And the equanimity is how you react to those three states.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. You have equanimity towards whatever rises. So it's much bigger, overarching. These three states are just related to sensation. So they're very specific.
Yes, I understand it.
Okay. Yeah.
I am just using it as a practice.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good question.
I just had a little something to add just as a story for that because it really brought to mind. I drive a lot for my work, and I listen to the radio a lot. And I was listening to a piece today on how much information we miss that's coming our way, how much information we miss. And it was a study about the phenomenon of when people feel that their lives are threatened or in great danger, time seems to slow down. And it talked about the perceived amount of time versus the actual amount of time, but it mentioned just the great detail to which people's memories could work under these moments of extreme duress, where they could remember, the skin tone of a man like in the distance, and they could look at their watch and remember what time it was, all within a split second. And it was kind of a study on how memory works and how most of the time when we're not in danger, our memory is filtering out all the unimportant information. But in those moments, the attention becomes so focused because your life depends on it that all that information that is missed otherwise becomes just really clear for a split second. So I just thought that was an interesting story along the lines of just we're not paying very close attention, it seems like, for the most part.
Marcy.
I have a question about bodhicitta. It's kind of like a chicken and an egg question for me. I don't know. I had a moment yesterday where it was like I just saw this part of myself that really, there's part of me that at certain times I just really don't care about other people. And I think I just want so hard to be not that way, that I don't really see that very often. I'm in a helping profession, I'm a Buddhist. I spend a lot of time studying the Dharma, but really, I don't know, it's just all of a sudden I realized, I've been doing these bodhicitta practices for a long time. I set that as my intention to practice. But sometimes when I really look at it, it's except for the people that I have attachment to, I just don't really care. And I don't like it, but I'm wondering, like, so are these, so, and I've been reading about how intention to practice, like it really, the bodhicitta intention of wanting to help all beings is really, like that's really should be the underlying intention. And I'm thinking like, well, why am I practicing?
Mm-hmm.
And I just sometimes think, well, I'm practicing because I want to be that. I don't know. I'm just really confused. And I feel like, I just feel like I'm in this place where it's like I'm comparing myself to all my other Sangha members, and they all seem like people who really care about people. And there's all these like prayers on the community list for people. I don't know. But so
We carried it off.
when you're doing like a thing like Tonglen or loving kindness practice, is that practice in and of itself supposed to sort of like magically make you more caring? Or do you just, I mean, is it something that is going to actually like change my heart over time? Because I don't see it. I mean, I have a lot of caring for people who are like right in front of me and strangers. Like, so I know I have that capacity. But this whole thing about like all sentient beings and even people that like, you know, this person's cousin, like I don't know. And I feel like I don't know. And then I start going into this like shame thing. I'm a bad Buddhist because I'm pretending to do all this stuff. Anyway, I don't know what the question is. I just need some guidance around like, how do you approach a practice like that if you don't already...
If you're not already enlightened.
There, exactly.
And then you wouldn't need the practice.
I think you almost answered your question right at the end there.
It's called practice.
It was, how would I do this if I wasn't already feeling it? And there's a certain way I was looking, there's a certain point I thought, well, you just demonstrated that your practice was actually working, because would you have looked even previously to see whether or not the scope of your well-wishing thoughts was as big as you thought it should be? The question wouldn't even have come to your mind, right? I mean, I never thought about it before I was confronted with this proposition, bodhicitta. I never thought about, am I feeling nice enough towards all sentient beings? It never occurred to me. The question did not come up, I guarantee you. I don't know, maybe it came up for you, in which case I would say you actually started ahead of where I was, maybe even ahead of where I am now. But no, that's very often it's like, I just noticed that I was very distracted. Ooh, good. Oh, that wasn't a problem? No, that was actually noticing that you were distracted. And in this case, it's noticing that I am not actually always, that I have not yet cultivated the stability of this deep aspiration. But I think it's very challenging, actually. And I think to actually develop really deep compassion and deep loving kindness, that kind of caring, we have to see deeper and deeper into our own suffering and confusion. Because that's actually where we'll begin to see kind of the universality of it, as opposed to the particulars of it. And that's actually if we only limit our sense of compassion to a reaction to a particular story that unfolds in front of us, it's a very narrow view. That's actually, you could say, oh, that's not compassion. It is in part, but there's a way you could say, that's not very deep, really. It's very self-referential. You just told me a story that I happen to react to. That's about me. So when we actually begin to see kind of the depth of our own confusion, it's easier and easier to actually feel like, good land, we're all in this. We're actually all in this, and we're all trapped. We have to see the kind of the trapped part of it in our own stream of being. And appreciating that, then there's something that actually starts to open up. And it goes beyond, that's the only way that it actually goes beyond the stories. And the stories are just going to be about the people that are around us. It's actually very hard to go beyond that without turning it into a very abstract thing. Kind of like all the people I know and can name, and then, etc. Them, the rest. So that, etc. is kind of, it doesn't really get the juices flowing. But that sense of appreciation for the vastness of the sense of entrapment, the vastness of that can actually connect. So then we can then feel not just, and you said something kind of nice about even strangers, that you can connect there. That's good. That's good. Most people don't even connect at that level. Stranger is just kind of other. But that opening gradually can get bigger and bigger. Some of it really helps to, I won't say it really helps. Anyway, it helped me actually to spend time in contemplation, spend a lot of time in contemplation on different kinds of circumstances that beings could be in. Just really thinking about a lot of different kinds of situations, and not particular examples that I knew, but things that I could easily imagine, sort of things that I'd heard of. And the more that I could bring that to mind, and the feeling and my response to that, the more I could feel like that response actually was something that didn't depend on a story, didn't depend on actually meeting a particular person. It was actually something that I could hold because I could generate it based on just reflecting on these situations. I could cultivate that as something that I could start to meet all circumstances with. And that, I think, is a real important step, to be able to start just, and then strangers are good. I used to work downtown, and I would go out for walks at lunch, and I'd make a point of going one block and then turning quickly and seeing who was there, and then noting my reaction. Part of it was just noting how fast a reaction comes up. But then also to be able to engage in the practice of just whoever is there, to have this sense of well-wishing towards this, whoever it was, just in that, have that be there before I met somebody. So those are the kinds of things that I think can deepen it. But I'll just go back and say, I think you actually described some success in the practice when you said, I don't have this. I remember doing mandala offering prayers and thinking, actually, I have no intention of giving away my house.
Yeah, or my car.
Or my car.
Or my
and
garment.
or my or my wife. What?
No way.
No way. And that's, that's kind of, you have to go pretty deep before you see kind of what the practice is about. I have to go a lot deeper.
Khenpo Lodro Donyo, when he was here, someone asked him, how have you developed your compassion? And honest to goodness, I wrote this down and have read it many times. He said, "Oh, I don't have any." And we all laughed. And he was serious because he kind of explained he didn't have that fully developed compassion, which is instantaneous, spontaneous. You wish the end of the suffering of every being you see. You just carry that with you. So it's a hard thing to, I think the expectation of having it already is too big. It's just keep practicing. And like Bill said, your question showed your practice has led you to see, oh, I have it here, I don't have it there. I have it this moment, I don't have it that moment. I do the same thing as Bill when I go through the close by park, and I notice how I feel like the little children playing on the playground, pretty easy, like looking at them, wishing that they'd be free of all their suffering, wishing them happiness. Then I get over here and some guy's looking kind of dicey to me, and I'm like, and I just see, this is the stories I'm going through. But then remembering the Buddhist worldview is always quite helpful, that this is just one life of many. That person was my little brother. That one was my mother. Carrying that thing that Lama Michael talks about, even you don't believe that everyone's been your mother, just try it on. And don't use mother if your mother's been difficult to you, but use, best friend. Everyone has been your best friend. So you walk into the grocery store with that attitude and you hold it close, you can get in a really nice conversation with the person who's the clerk or the meat guy, or it just, your mind is changing. So we do have to work it, but the shoulds and the expectations just trip us into this discouraged space. So they have to be confronted and let go of. More rejoicing in progress already made. And they say one way to do that rejoicing is think of yourself 10 years ago or 5 years ago, what your mind was like, and see if there's been any improvement. And I can think 10 years ago and go, oh my God, yeah, so that's helpful. Yeah.
I thought for a moment, if I could, I would wish you a moment of omniscience so you could see into everybody else's mind stream and you would feel better about yourself. Yeah. Then I thought, oh no, but then you'd be horrified about the rest of us.
They call themselves Buddhists.
You would run for the door.
This kind of reminds you something of a... Nope, okay, good. This reminds me of something that I've been kind of wrestling with, which is how to refrain from identifying with like the shortcomings that I see when I'm working on myself, whatever you want to call practice or the path. Sort of like for me, it's really difficult to maintain that sense of space that is necessary when I sort of come into contact with a limitation of I can only go so far in this present moment in terms of compassion or loving kindness or any of the words we use to describe waking up. And it's really hard, and I really have no strategy for refraining from identifying with that and like internalizing and being like, that's a problem that I have. So it's not really a question, just kind of like that's something that I do a lot. Mm-hmm. Like I see this issue and then I make it my issue. It's something that that I actually have to exercise or expel or get rid of somehow.
And the thing you have to expel is this tendency to identify with your
Failings.
whatever you
Yeah, it's sort of like
decide to call failings.
labeling myself as a failure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So because that's where I struggle with sort of bodhicitta and this idea of cultivating this, heartfelt, spontaneous, sort of heartfelt, sincere, uncontrived well-wishing for other people. It's pretty like I have to really like backdoor think myself into these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I just kind of go back to the emotional. This person doesn't make me feel. I don't feel good because of this, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm. This is something that you've brought up. Did you want to tag something on there or anything? Yeah. You've brought up something like this quite often. So I'm not going to hesitate to say you have a kind of a style. This is like a style. And I think it's helpful to think of it this way. Sort of like this is my kind of, to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, this is like my fashion statement. I put on the robe of self-denigration, and to recognize that that's something that we put on, and we say the color suits me so well. I'm always going to wear this. And it's very difficult. It's like we just can't bring ourselves to just go back. No, it's better like this. Yeah, it's back there. So since it's really hard to, and in this particular style, browbeating yourself into stopping wearing this fashionable item is just another. It's not going this way. It's it's trying. Yeah, it's putting another coat on top. So I think the thing to do, one thing that I would suggest anyway, is to spend a fair amount of time actively cultivating another style. So instead of trying to not do something, to do something else, to actively cultivate the kinds of things that we've often talked about, and you even mentioned it earlier, the rejoicing, to actively cultivate a perspective of, it's good that I noticed this. This is a success. To go through that and not try to treat it like, I'm doing this instead. I'm doing this to get rid of this other thing. But to get very used to like putting on the robe of rejoicing, to do it over and over again, and to really kind of figure out some ways to bring that as an active cultivation. Because that's it's very easy. There's kind of a moralistic frame of mind that only observes failure.
Well, that's kind of like, I kind of grew up figuring out success in that way. Like that's how you do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but that piece of we're all sinners. With kind of everything is related. See that? There's another failure. There's another failure. There's another failure. So being able to cultivate kind of the positive outlook. Just don't try to battle with that. Just take some time to cultivate a different kind of positive outlook. That rejoicing. And you can figure out kind of a shtick, and at first it'll feel like a shtick to work with, but it's just, the other thing is a shtick too. It's just a style. So you can put on a different one. You can try a different fashion statement. You can do it. I've actually watched you. So let's dedicate. By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Another way to put it is that in the practice where you count the black stones and the white stones, for some